Hey guys, Vice Fister here. In this video I wanted to show you guys some Mythic Raid boss testing while going over some of my overall thoughts on the Devastation Evoker's story so far. Mythic Vault of the Incarnates testing is up this week and I've been having a ton of fun here. This is Aranog, the first boss of the raid, who I did cover in my heroic videos a week or two ago, covering his basic mechanics. He was cool but kinda boring, but the added mythic mechanics make this into a real fight. A really solid, fun fight that sets a great pace to what I expect to be an amazing raid. I wanted to show you guys this mythic boss because I totally own him. But Evoker performs really well on this boss and I end up being the number 1 overall DPS by the time he's like 5%, in which we decide to wipe to keep testing him. But I really want to point out that my gearing stats on this test character are nowhere even close to the super sweaty high eye level, full crafted gear with tons of big stat gems, and I've won exactly 0 of the mini heroic boss drops from prior testing. I have none of this, while some people do. Not bashing anyone here, just pointing out how well Evoker can perform even without super min-maxed raid testing gear. This is the talent tree I was running, which is highly likely to not even be close to the optimal tree here, and I surely made countless mistakes due to less experience with Evoker being a brand new class. Also without a proper weak aura UI setup for tracking stuff, which is just even more proof that Evoker absolutely slams and we're already in a great spot tuning wise. As we get closer to pre-patch and potentially an Evoker release on live, I see more and more new and old faces in the Evoker Discord asking about our viability already, despite the fact that we're really only beginning the first real tuning passes. I want to be clear that anything we see number-wise in testing at this point has the potential to be absolutely meaningless come launch, as large sweeping changes can and will potentially happen every week, even until after Dragonflight launches. Now with that being said, Devastation Evoker looks to be tuned extremely well already, and I'm seeing people who have put a ton of time into picking up Evoker as a new main, such as Preheat and myself, absolutely popping off in testing in both AoE and single target. I personally don't foresee Dev getting all that many adjustments to our numbers, and instead seeing more time being put into fixing our numerous bugs, maybe cleaning up some interactions with our kit, which I'll cover in this video. Don't get me wrong, Evoker still has tons of issues, so while I'm very excited to play it in Dragonflight, I do feel that we're in a good place overall. I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that anybody from the new player, to the altaholic, to the veteran will pick up Evoker and have a great time. I will cover that, don't you worry, but first I want to highlight some of the huge pluses for Devastation Evoker in our development roller coaster. Flat out, Devastation plays so much better than it did just a few weeks ago, and that's due to the last 4 major changes. Gonna stick up for the Evoker dev here for a minute, but every change has been super impactful and made strides in bringing more fluidity to our gameplay. Things like the Burnout talent rework, which made our Fire Breath ticks have a chance to make our next Living Flame instant cast, stacking up to 2, means that we not only gain damage but also mobility via instant casts. Then the Scintillation talent rework, causing our Essence Surge proc a chance to increase from 8 to 15%, literally doubling our main Essence Burst generator. Possibly the biggest change right here in speeding up our gameplay with extended disintegration loops. Thirdly, the Hover double change, in which the GCD lockout was nearly cut in half, and then also allowing all casts to finish while moving as long as it began during hover. And then finally, the most recent change, the pleasant surprise that was a combo of the Fire Breath, Heat Wave, Blast Furnace rework, which injected a lot more decision making and flexibility in our Empower usage in talent trees. Every single player that has put multiple hours a week into Evoker since Alpha would agree with me here, especially once we've gotten a taste of meaningful content in M+ and Mythic raids. Devastation finally feels like a real, full-bodied spec now. Now that I've given due praise to those responsible for the fluid and fun parts of Evoker, I'm going to be a bit harsher than ever with the many glaring issues that has followed Evoker in general since the very start of Alpha. These problems need to be shared because quite frankly, they are big enough to completely turn players interested in Evoker away from the class completely. What a shame it would be to spend all this time developing a brand new class, with it even being a core feature of Dragonflight, just for it to immediately start off on the wrong foot with a highly negative perception amongst most of the population. A lot of the hate towards Evoker I feel is unjustified, which is why I think you guys should put a bit more trust into people like myself who have tested the class almost exclusively for the past 3 months throughout Alpha and Beta. There are certain big and respected names in the WoW community who have been quite vocal about the most apparent negatives Evoker has, which is fine and justified, but also miss out on nearly all the upside, which is pretty frustrating to us Evoker nerds who have taken a more holistic approach to its nuances. But anyways, here are some of the more major, and some more obscure, issues yet to be addressed along with a super simple proposed solution. Our defensives have been a major source of discussion for months preceding the latest M+ test, the first real challenge to the class's survivability. It was apparent from the jump that Obsidian Scales is likely the single worst personal damage reduction in the game. 20% DR is a normal baseline similar to Druid's Bark Skin, but its CD is 1.5 minutes longer than Bark Skin. Not only do you have to path through a completely optional point just to gain access to spending another point to make it still a bit worse than Bark Skin, but that same pathing talent required is actively hurting your raid or M+ group in most situations. This 50% slow is great for when you want it, but when some priority ad spawns or a boss or the tank is grouping a pack in M+, the last thing you want is to be disintegrating one and applying a massive slow to only that one guy, desyncing it from the rest of the group and making it harder to put into position. This can and will be actively hurting your group in certain situations, which is further compounded when you're taking into consideration how much devastation is rewarded for being the first to swap to ads via our mastery. Baseline scales is bad, and then you spend another 2 points to troll your raid and make scales a little less bad. An easy fix to this is just swap the tree positions of Permeating Chill and Obsidian Bulwark, and make it reduce scales down to 1 minute. Still not ideal, but then at least we have something more similar to baseline Bark Skin. Renewing Blaze is also a huge trap, defensive in quotation marks, because it's essentially just a super long heal over time that grows upon taking damage. I often find myself wanting to pair this with Scales or another defensive, as this will never save you from death alone, unless it's in niche situations like long drawn out rot damage. Similar to Obsidian Scales, Renewing Blaze has a buff node that is pretty trash and often not even worth taking the point. Seems like a no-brainer to make the hot heal faster over a shorter duration baseline, and to buff or rework the choice node options into something more practical and powerful. Some options include turning the heal over time into a shield instead, so that it's not actively losing value when your healer is quick to top you off, or make it instantly heal you for 30% HP upon use as well, or maybe even a cheat death while it's active, similar to Fire Mage's Cauterize. I think the additional skill of having to actively use your cheat death is a good trade-off to its power if you think that would be too strong. I believe Zephyr will likely be considered more of a 2-minute personal for Evoker than specifically an assigned raid CD, as hitting it during AoE like intended will passively DR people who will also benefit at the same time anyways. This is fine as is. The odd thing is that with Scales and Renewing Blaze being our two weakest defensives, the recent overtuned M+ testing has proven that we need to be a bit more creative with our defensives. I've always had my eye on Rescue plus Twin Guardians as a strong personal, and I now firmly believe it'll be near mandatory for any truly challenging content while it's tough to survive. The 30% max HP shield is more effective at staving off a one-shot than a 20% DR, so that's its clear use. Then considering its baseline 1 minute CD and also gives the same 30% max HP shield to an ally, and it quickly becomes possibly our most effective personal CD. The issue is that it's pretty clunky to use, and getting used to quickly selecting a target and casting it without getting yourself into even more trouble is going to have an extremely high skill ceiling. People meme about the advanced part of Evoker, but the more you see our negatives, the more it actually kind of makes sense. If only because Evoker as a class is asked to wrestle with more actions and jump more hurdles than any other class just to do the same or even worse, which leads me to my next negative. 25-yard range. The more I play Evoker, honestly the less this bothers me. At this point I'm pretty used to the 25-yard range and I'm starting to feel natural with it, which is odd considering I was previously maining Boomkin at 45-yard range. Pretty massive difference, but luckily there have been very little issues in all my M+ and raid testing thus far that was out of my control. There will be times when I hover dash to dodge out of a mechanic and find myself traveling further than 25 yards. This is painful, but again, it's almost always within my power to correct. The bigger problem I have with the 25-yard range is community perception. Many players will drop Evoker just because of this, and that really hurts to see. The range limitation is just completely arbitrary, while offering nothing new or unique or exciting. I'm still pretty confused as to why the devs thought we needed some new mid-range archetype, while giving us almost nothing as a clear upside. People will say, but you have the most OP movement ability in the game in Hover. Sure, it's extremely good, but when you add up the facts, it seems like we have to have Hover just to function. Things like how we have less baseline instant cast than every other spec, have 15 less range than every ranged, how we need to be sitting and channeling Disintegrate for 70% of the fight, and how Empower spells don't work with Hover. Again, it seems like we just have to work harder than other range specs just to cover the bases. Hover isn't always up, although it can be up a lot, and Hover isn't the instant fix to every range issue. Something a bit more obscure is how our Empowers have been bugged since pre-alpha. As you might know, unlike every single cast in the game, Empower spells incur a GCD at the end of the cast, meaning you can charge up a Fire Breath for 3 seconds, release it, and still have to wait through a GCD. One of the bugs is that there's a super tiny window in which you can queue up another spell as the Empower fires off, but before the GCD is incurred, meaning you can completely bypass the Empower GCD with quick fingers and timing. This was communicated in very early alpha to the devs, and we got a blue post clarifying that the Empower GCD is intended. But here we are 3 months later, still with the ability to abuse a bug and gain multiple percents worth of damage. If that wasn't enough, a more recently discovered bug is that you can have Tip the Scales at the ready and macro both of your Empower spells together in this order, allowing you to instantly fire off both Empowers at full value via Tip the Scales. This can also be paired with the previous GCD bypass bug, so effectively casting 3 different spells at the same exact time. I showcased this in my recent YouTube short in which I was one-shotting players in duels and arena skirmishes to highlight how abusable this is. Should these 2 bugs somehow make it to live, Devastation Evokers will be all but expected to utilize these 2 bugs or lose out on multiple percents worth of DPS, and you will absolutely see more compilations like my short of people going around in AoE one-shotting people in PvP. Maybe then it'll get some attention. I could honestly go on another 15 minutes about the host of smaller issues Evoker has, but it might bore you, and anyways, the above are the most important ones. I find it both hilarious and kinda sad that I basically have a tier list of Evoker issues from least to most important, and have all but dropped the lesser issues as we get closer to Dragonflight, just because the chances that they get addressed dwindles by the day. But to quickly summarize a few, Essence still seems like an afterthought, with Essence Burst being our true resource. Our self-healing has been gutted despite being bad, even when taking the handful of talents specifically made to buff it. Deep Breath is strong, but feels clunkier than it probably should. An entire capstone path being too weak to even ever consider. Our Mastery, despite being strong, makes us feel weaker as the fight goes on. Pyre being too weak to even care about using 90% of the time, even in AoE, etc, etc. You know, you would think this huge unfinished list of issues Evoker carries would turn me off from the class, but it's simple. Evoker in general is still fun to play from the start, and it's only gotten better with each change. This gives me a lot of hope because, unlike some classes and specs like Ret Pally and Shadow Priest, our changes have only been received overwhelmingly positive for our overall gameplay feel. I also don't want to sound like an Evoker shill, because if I'm being honest, there have been multiple points in my Evoker journey thus far in which I was seriously considering if taking on this task would be even worth it. And now after putting Evoker through the fire in more challenging tests like Mythic Raids or even just surviving an M+ with Thundering Affix, my answer is yes. This is my Dragonflight main. If you think I'm an absolute psycho, let me know in the comments, or even just drop your biggest complaint about Evoker in general. Did I miss anything important to you? I think we're in good hands, guys, and I'm really starting to feel like Evoker will be a super great choice if you don't mind putting in the time to learn it, for both healing and DPS. I couldn't be more excited to finally make my own Evoker on live during pre-patch and getting some high eye level and blast through Dragonflight on launch, in which I will be posting Devastation Evoker boss guides on how to tackle each boss in M+ with optimal talent builds, gameplay priorities, and encounter specific tips to get those orange parses. Toss me a like and subscribe if you enjoyed my content, and check out my whole list of heroic raid testing overviews, healing talent and build guide, and more videos on playing through the new dungeons. And as always, appreciate the time, and see you next time.